So I'm sure if you hang in the circles I run in, you know what's happening with Twitch streamer Destiny, and while I certainly feel catharsis knowing he's getting the hot iron rod of the public square shoved firmly up his ass, it brings me no joy to see how this situation has been handled by those reporting on it. Without going into detail here, the victim in this case got her privacy blown out equal parts by scumfuck tanky Badempanada and scumfuck Marxist pseudo-intellectual President Sunday. Why? Because Destiny needed to be held accountable. The best and only reconcilable defense I've heard for why this is even remotely considered a good thing is that since the identity of Pixie has been revealed, more women have come forward. However, this is not sufficient in my eyes. Depending on the jurisdiction, there is either a limited or no cutoff date for when somebody can file a civil suit against somebody, and even when it is limited, when it's involving something as serious as sexual misconduct, there are exceptions and extensions that can be applied. Even criminal cases, despite being more rigid, have leeway with sex crimes. So given this almost universal precedent, if we had just let this case take its natural progression, it's likely more women would have come forward to share their side of things regardless. Instead, many people in the commentary community jumped the gun. A person's autonomy to me is paramount. Call it libertarian ethics, call it humanitarian, call it a virtue ethicist. Really, you could pin my modum operandi under a myriad of labels. I don't really care. You can make the argument that keeping your identity a secret would have been unrealistic, and it was unrealistic, let's not mince words here, but in my humble opinion, the way I've seen this expressed seems less like a pragmatic observation and more like a post hoc justification for her identity getting leaked in the first place. To my understanding, both Nicholas Diorio and Sunday knew of the risk, discussed it in a voice call, and Sunday went full force with it anyway, allegedly to capitalize on the story. This is not okay. This will never be okay. Constant coverage of this case can have insane ramifications, ones that could easily jeopardize the case. Just the fact that evidence is being spread amongst these creators that pertains to the case has potential to screw Pixie over, as it might become admissible as a result, either due to witness tampering claims or jury contamination. And as Sunday has shown, it's not exactly like this evidence is being handled with care. These streamers might not be bound by the ethics journalists are supposed to follow, but they should conduct themselves to that standard, if not a higher one, no matter how well-intentioned they may be. They are also not free to simply say anything they want either. Despite the lack of journalistic ethics, courts can and often will issue a gag order, or it might be referred to as an injunction, or some sort of other legalese, depending on where you live. It's basically court-sanctioned censorship to prevent these kind of things. It is often looked down upon, but if the judge finds it necessary, you may have to contend with it regardless of how contentious it may be. And unlike most in this situation, at least some of the evidence being shared might actually legally constitute doxing. It's also possible that both Destiny and the multiple victims in this lawsuit might also get a gag order, because Destiny has made plenty of public statements that could influence the public opinion, and Pixie, as well as many of the other victims, have given a lot of these YouTubers permission to talk about the case when in reality they really shouldn't have. At least not without first having their lawyers review the actual content, which they did not as far as I know. I would advise against giving Pixie or any of the other victims a gag order personally, but I'm not the judge residing over this case. I know it'd be like asking a railway worker to give up an entire 3-month salary, but I really do think both those in the right and those blatantly in the wrong should consider stopping their coverage on this case until it's over. I know many people hold that covering Destiny's wrongdoings is ultimately more important than Pixie's anonymity. I disagree, because all of that will come when the courts have settled it. More so, it will likely come down with a hammer harder than any YouTuber or Twitch streamer could muster on their own. The accountability of Destiny will be so much sweeter on top of the legal outcomes. Wait until he's already in shackles before beating him in the street. Save your scorn for when he's at his lowest. And no, I'm not being hypocritical by making this video. Unlike Diorio, Chud, President Sunday, Kuihman, I refuse to add kindling to the already growing fire by mentioning every aspect of this case before we even have a court ruling. Not to say their intent was malicious, but my personal interpretation is that it was in the vein of being somewhat reckless. Meaning, until we have information, my reporting will be extremely sparse. I've got 3 statements regarding this case currently, including this video, a live stream I was recently on where I mentioned this video, others said more to me but I kept it hush-hush, and another statement in a video that is yet to be released, none of which go into explicit detail of what's going on, and until the case is resolved, I will continue to be vague if I make any more public statements at all. If you're wondering why I haven't given you any specific examples of evidence or infractions, well, it's quite simple. This video already runs the risk of adding somewhat, but I think it needs to be said. And my video is in no way meant to be taken as endorsement for further discussion, quite the opposite. While I'm making this, I won't be guiding any of you into the case. Stay out of it, don't speculate, leave it be. Don't interact with anyone mentioned here, and keep your distance. There is a point where a cautious approach to leading people away from the conversation becomes needed. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a Pandora's box scenario, and there's no putting this back into the box. The only thing I or any of us can do is minimize the risk involved, and since no one else is doing that, I felt like I should. If by some dead man's hand you see this video, or any others like it and get pulled for that jury, request the judge remove you immediately. If by some wild metric you know anyone working on the case between Stephen Bonnell and Pixie, do not speak to them about any of this. If you get pulled into it, pull yourself out. I don't like how this case is going in terms of the public. I can already see the seeds of a mistrial sprouting up, and it hasn't even been a couple of months. They're moving from the pre-trial into the trial period, so now would be the time for everyone to not do what they're doing. Destiny, while I question how smart he actually is sometimes, is undeniably a manipulative little wretch, and I'm positive he might try and use Sunday's fuck-ups, or the general coverage, or even Pixie's mental state, the discussion of which frankly makes my stomach churn, as ammo in court. And it might work. The individuals involved are not small creators like myself. We're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of subscribers under their belt, some of them even being cross-platform, more than the individuals I've mentioned here by far. That's not even going into the people running defense for Destiny who are big enough to drive discourse. There are quite a few of them, as paradoxical as it sounds. With so much media coverage and conflicting narratives around the case, it becomes increasingly difficult to find jurors who haven't already formed an opinion. This makes it less likely that an unbiased jury can be selected at all. This is all cause for concern. I do understand sometimes the courts fail, however, this shit, if Destiny is smart, he will force the courts to fail using this flippant coverage to do so. It matters so much less that you have an airtight case if the judge can't find jurors who aren't compromised in some way. This goes for all cases that get spun out of control on the internet, not just Destiny. People have this instinctual urge to tell people to go to the cops rather than making their accusations online, but it's clear to me now that they don't really understand why that's their instinct. For full transparency, I'm in a Discord server where prominent figures have been discussing the case, the identities of which I will not name. I haven't been directly involved in those discussions, and I've deliberately avoided engaging in speculation. My proximity to the case is at least partially why I'm making this. Speculation will eventually trickle down, and we need to all be careful. My stance, however, is anything but related to inside conversations, as I wasn't really privy to them. I don't have any access to evidence outside of what has been shared publicly, and even that information isn't something I'd advise you actively seek out, as I've already stated. I am not nearly close enough to this case for my neutrality to be compromised, but full transparency is not only a virtue, it is needed so you know what you need to know. And I will say this because it's an important distinction to make. Chud Logic, Nicholas Diorio, Kuihman, and many of the others covering this case, without myself ruminating on their motivations, seem like they're only doing so because they find Destiny's actions egregious. If their coverage is somewhat inconsistent, it's only because they're doing their job, and may have felt kind of indirectly pulled into it by people like Sunday and Badempanada. Most of them have passé associations with Sunday, and may have only joined because of external pressure. It's not necessarily their fault, and I won't even knock them for continuing to cover this case, though I wish they wouldn't. Destiny deserves nothing more to be held accountable to the highest degree, but we will not get there by acting as sensationalized as the mainstream media we claim to be better than. Even Destiny, as much as I hate the man, deserves due process, not for his sake, but for his victims. Never in a million years did what I thought I'd be thrown into a sexual misconduct case involving Destiny, of all people, just because I joined a Discord server with some people who I thought were kind of cool. I suppose at the end of the day, it probably does go to show that we aren't the ones who should be handling this. Personally, I think I'm more equipped than just about anyone involved, and even I wouldn't do this. Again, best of intentions, I'm sure, but watching a lot of this unfold has kind of shown to me that almost no one involved should continue. At the very least, not in a way that's perceptible to the public, if that. I know some may disagree with my stance, and that's fine, but I do think it's at least worth bringing into the conversation for Pixie's sake. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.